So this is where fractions start getting a little bit more difficult because we need to find a common denominator. And when our denominators are different, it's best if we write them vertically. Now I'm going to go through this first problem really slowly. To find a common denominator, you're going to take your larger denominator and you're going to list its count bys. So 3 times 1, 3 times 2, 3 times 3, 3 times 4, 3 times 5. Now there's two ways you can do this. You can say, all right, does 2 go into 3? Nope. Does 2 go into 6? Yes. And so you know 6 is your common denominator. Or if it's easier, you can list your count bys of your other denominator, 2, 4, 6, and as soon as you find one that's the same, that's your lowest common denominator, you change your denominator because you can only add fractions together if they have the same denominator. Now you need to figure out how to make your new fraction. So you think, whatever I'm doing to the denominator here, I'm going to do to the numerator. So I think, what do I do to my 3 to get to 6? I multiply that by 2. So I have to do the same thing to the numerator, which gives me 2. Down here, I have to say, what do I do to the 2 to get to a 6, which is I multiply it by 3. So I multiply my numerator by 3, and I get 3. Now I'm going to forget about these. And I'm going to go and say, all right, I've got my denominator is the same. And then I add 2 plus 3 is 5. And there's my answer. All right, so let's go through this again. I'm going to go to my larger denominator and I'm going to list its count bys. 10 times 1 is 10. And now to make this simpler, I can say, okay, does 5 go into 10? And yes, 5 does go into 10. So that's going to be my common denominator. Again, you could list your count bys. These are my count bys of 10. My count bys of 5 are 5, 10, 15, 20, and I can find the lowest one they have in common. That works too. It's the same thing. Now I say, all right, what did I multiply 5 by to get to 10? I multiplied it by 2. So I multiply this by 2, and I get 2. My 10 stayed as 10, so my 7 stays a 7 because it's multiplying by 1. I add them together, and I get 9/10. So again, I'm going to think about my count bys of 9. 9 times 1 is 9, times 2, times 3, times 4. My count bys of 6, 6, 12, 18. Oh, hey, 18. That's what they have in common. So I am going to, that is my lowest common denominator. I think, all right, I multiply 9 times 2 to get to 18. So I'm going to multiply 2 times 2, and I get 4. I'm going to multiply 6 times 3 to get 18. So I multiply 1 times 3, and I get 3. Now I subtract, because we're subtracting, and I have 1/18. If I list my count bys of 32, I have 32 times 1 is 32. And I'm going to stop right there. Does 4 go into 32? It sure does. So I have already found my lowest common denominator. 32 stayed the same, so the 5 will stay the same. The 4 I multiplied by 8, so I multiply the 1 by 8. And then I add them together, and I get 13/32. So I think about my count bys of 6. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2, 6 times 3, 6 times 4. So then I go to my 3's, and maybe I list them out this time. 3 times 1, 3 times 2, 3 times 3, 3 times 4. Oh, they have 6 in common. So 6 is my lowest common denominator. I multiplied this by 1. Multiplied this by 1, meaning they stay the same. My 3 I multiplied by 2, so I'm going to multiply my 2 times 2, and I get 4. Remember, we're subtracting, so I get 5 minus 4 is 1. My denominator stays the same, and I'm done. And this is the last one that we're going to do together, because I want to see if you can figure out the last 3 on your own. But I'm going to list my count bys again. 11 times 1 is 11. 2 doesn't go into 11. 11 times 2 is 22, and obviously 2 goes into that, because I had to multiply it by 2. So my 11 I multiplied by 2, so I need to multiply my 5 by 2. My 2 I had to multiply by 11, so I need to multiply my 1 by 11. Now I'm adding, and I get 21/22. Now, some of you might see right away when we're making a comparison between the two, because we want to know who grew more, that you know that 7/8 is more than 3/4 just by memory. But let's pretend you didn't. What we want to do then is to make it so both of them have a common denominator. So we have 7/8 and 3/4. So if I think of my count bys of 8, I have 8 times 1 is 8. I know that 4 goes into 8, so I have found my common denominator. I multiply this by 2, and I multiply this by 2, which gets me to 6. So already we see that 7/8 is bigger than 6/8. So we know that Leona grew more. But now we have to know how much more. So we're going to take these two numbers and subtract them, 7/8 minus 6/8, and she grew 1/8 of an inch, more. Now this is a little bit of a challenging problem because it says sac A has 16 horns and 14 harmonicas. Sac B has 7 horns and 8 harmonicas. You are hoping for a harmonica, so which do you draw from? So what I need to do is I need to find out how many total instruments are in each of them. So sac A has a total of 30 because I add together 16 and 14. Sac B has a total of 15 because I add 7 and 8. Now I want to know how many harmonicas are in each, because remember our denominator is always our total. So in sac A there are 14 harmonicas, and in sac B there are 8 harmonicas. Now I need to compare the two. So if I look of what's my common denominator of 15 and 30, I know that 15 will go into 30, so I'm going to change this. And I'm going to say, all right, we're going to multiply this by 2 to get to 30, which means I multiply this by 2 and I get 16. So I have 16 out of 30 chances to get a harmonica in sac B, but only 14 out of 30 in sac A. So I would definitely choose sac B because there's a better chance of drawing a harmonica. Or you could say because 16/30 is greater than 14/30. Either of those would be correct. Number 12 says, for breakfast, Oliver drank 5/16 of a pitcher of juice. His brother Joey drank 3/8 of the pitcher of juice. How much did they drink together? So we know that when we see together, we're going to add. So now we're just back to what we did at the beginning of the lesson here, where we need to find a common denominator. So I think of my count bys of 16. 16 times 1 is 16. 8 goes into 16, so I know that that is my common denominator. I didn't change the 16, so I don't change the 5. I multiplied the 8 by 2, so I multiply the 3 by 2. They drank a total of 11/16 of a pitcher. Number 13 says if the pitcher that we just read about held exactly 1 quart of juice, how much is left? Well, remember, 1 is the same thing as 2 over 2, 4 over 4, or in this case, we want to say 16 over 16. And we're going to subtract what they already drank. Because remember, we're saying we have 1 whole, and we're subtracting what they already drank out, and we're just converting it like this. So now 16 minus 11 is 5, and my denominator stays the same. There's 5/16 of a quart left. So on the remembering side, remember, when we're finding the area of a rectangle, we just take the length times the width. So you're multiplying those two numbers, and it will be in centimeters squared. For the area of a triangle, we're going to take half of the base times the height, or you could also say base times height divided by 2. I'm going to half this, multiply those together, and you'll get your area. So I'm only going to do 3 of these next ones because this you have had a lot of practice with recently. Remember, all it's saying is what did I do to my 6 to get to 24? I multiplied 6 by 4. So I need to multiply the 1 by 4, and I get n equals 4. What did I do to the 3 to get to 15? I multiplied that by 5. So I'm going to multiply the 4 times 5, and I get d equals 20. Here it went smaller, so I know I divided by 9, so I'm going to divide 54 by 9, and I get D equals 6. You're going to do that with the rest of them. Number 15 is going back to our decimals. It says a truck is 5.4 meters tall, and it drives under a bridge that is 6.2 meters tall. How much space is there? Meaning what's left over? You're going to take your 6.2 and you're going to subtract 5.4 and then find that in meters. Number 16 says a classroom is 10 yards long. The floor is being tiled with new square tiles that are each 10 inches long. How many tiles are needed to make one row the length of the classroom? You do not need to do this one. You can just write YouTube because we skipped the unit on the lesson on conversions.